So I would be welcoming you all to AIODC 2021 virtual conference. We are all set to go. I would like to welcome Dr. Tiwari Vinod, and along with him, I would like to welcome all our judges present here. And sir, over to you. Let's start with our first session and the first presenter.
Okay.
Sukriti?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, I'm here. So should I start sharing the screen?
Yeah, you can start. Dr. Sukriti, you can start with your presentation. You're the first presenter.
I think everyone can see my screen.
Yes. Good morning.
Yes.
Good morning, sir. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So actually, starting with my presentation, the topic of my free paper is like clinical outcome of modified crater chop versus conventional crater chop technique in phacoemulsification surgery for hard nuclear cataract, a randomized control study at SMS Medical College, Jaipur in 2018-2019. So, as we all know, the phacoemulsification in brown cataract have been technically more challenging and can be potentially damaging and can be associated with zonular weakness, thus resulting in high complication rate. There have been suggestion of modifications in phacoemulsification for brown cataract for a better results like large CCC using a good OVD, mainly chondroitin sulfate base, modulation and optimum use of phacoemulsification power, longitudinal and torsional, and last, using of nucleofractus techniques. So the various nucleofractus techniques which can be used in brown cataract are crater chop, tunnel chop, terminal chop, two-step chop, and nuclear softening with femtosecond laser. So aim of this study is to compare the clinical outcome of modified crater chop and conventional crater chop technique in phacoemulsification surgery for hard nuclear cataract. First objective is to compare the preoperative and postoperative values of the following parameter, that is BCVA, that best corrected visual acuity, intraocular pressure, central corneal thickness, endothelial cell density. Second, to compare the intraoperative values of the following parameters, that is effective phacoemulsification time, volume of balanced salt solution used, and to document or compare any complication in each study. This is a prospective longitudinal randomized control study with double blinding conducted in upgraded Department of Ophthalmology, SMS Medical College and Hospital, Jaipur from July 2018 to June 2019. The study population included the patient attending the upgraded Department of Ophthalmology, SMS Medical College and Hospital, Jaipur. Total of 50 eyes were taken in. Inclusion criteria, as we all know, is the cataract with grade 4, grade 5 hard nuclei. Exclusion criteria, most important, is preoperative endothelial cell density of less than 2000 cells, poorly dilating pupil, all white cortical cataract with hard nucleus, cataract with subluxation, old recent uveitis, intraoperative complication compromising vision, Fuchs endothelial dystrophy, glaucoma, or subject who had previous laser photocoagulation or other disorder compromising vision, and lastly, patient not giving consent. So phaco parameters used in this case is phaco power of 65%, pulse rate of 60, 30% of aspiration rate of 5 cc per minute. The vacuum was 360 mm of Hg with bottle height of 90. The specific parameters, we used aspiration rate of 26 cc per minute and vacuum of 100 mm of Hg with bottle height of 90 centimeters and phaco powers of 70%. EPT, that is effective phacoemulsification time, was calculating using a formula of UST, that is ultrasound time, into AP pos 3, that is actual position 3 by 100. So here is just a video showing. First video shows the modified crater chop, and the second video is conventional crater chop. In modified crater chop, we are making small, multiple, peripheral, incomplete chops which help to free the central nuclear core, and this central nuclear core will then be emulsified by mechanically chopping this nucleus. Whereas in conventional crater chop, you can see that we are making a crater and sculpting the crater to achieve a depth of 65% of the thickness of the nucleus, and then the remaining nuclear rim is chopped into multiple pieces and emulsified. So when we go with the results, we find that the EPT, that is effective phacoemulsification time in group A, that is modified Creighton CHOP, was less. It was 6.16. And similarly, the BCVA was, the BSS volume used was also less in group A, that is modified Creighton CHOP. For BCVA, we find that at first postoperative day, we have a comparatively significantly more vision in group modified Creighton CHOP because of less corneal edema. In ECD, we see that the endothelial cell density was more in modified Creighton CHOP in postoperative periods. The mean CCT, that is central corneal thickness, was found to be more in Creighton CHOP due to corneal edema in cases of hard cataract. And also we can see that the IOP was not significant there was no significant difference in both the two groups. So we conclude that the endothelial cell loss between the preoperative levels and the third one postoperative follow-up was between 4.1 to 4.6 for modified Creighton CHOP group and 8.4 to 8.8% in the conventional Creighton CHOP group. In this, one subject had from conventional Creighton CHOP group had intraoperative meiosis, which did not respond to the drug but was included in the study. One subject from the conventional Creighton CHOP also had zonular dialysis during the surgery and had to be excluded from the study. No complications were recorded in modified Creighton CHOP group. So we are giving peripheral soft nucleus is easy to chop. We know that. So incomplete peripheral chops are given in this technique, and this frees the central nucleus, which is then manually crushed as compared to sculpting the core, resulting in less stress on the zonules. And once the central core is out, we have three advantages. First, it gives more space in the bag. Second, the peripheral chops are can be completed easily, and small pieces are easy to prolapse in the iris plane, and they can be emulsified using less energy. So this is just a diagrammatic how we are doing. It's a small multiple chops are given, which are incomplete, and the central nucleus is then freed and it is emulsified. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Sukriti. Okay, so yeah, just a second. Hello.
Yes.
Dr. Tiwari, we do the questions along with the presentation, no? Just immediately after. Sir, you're on mute, sir.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Okay, Dr. Sukriti, I might have missed it, but did you tell us about the statistical significance in terms of the endothelial cell damage?
The endothelial cell count, and they were significantly less in modified Creighton CHOP. The damage was significantly less.
No, you mentioned the p-value, is it?
So I did mention it. I think I should go back to my PPT. So just 1 minute. So 1 minute, sorry.
Okay, it's in your abstract it says p is equal to 0.025. So maybe even if you missed it, but you mentioned in the abstract, it's okay. So it was.
Yes, sir.
No, let him finish. Ashu?
It's okay, sir, because I did not see the p value. Maybe I missed it, but in the abstract she's mentioned it's p.
So it is there.
It is there. P is there.
Yes,
okay.
She has mentioned it.
I'm sorry. Yeah. So fine, it's there.
Sukriti?
Yes, sir.
You have also mentioned in your abstract that the total volume used in your phaco surgery in group A was less, that is 105 ml, and
yes,
in group B it is 225 ml.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Is it for the total surgery or the time consumed for the phaco during the phaco job?
So for phaco it is.
Only phaco. So how did you measure it? How did you measure it?
So
full surgery, suppose you have used 200 ml or 300 ml.
So we noted the level of the BSS markings are there on the bottle.
They are in the scale of 100.
Packet. Yes, sir.
They are in the scale of 100. 100, sir, 200, 300, 400.
So it's an average, approximately value is taken. Like it is 50 ml. If it is half of full is 100, then we have to divide it and take it half.
Okay.
It is like approximated is not for like exact values were not taken. It was approximately that it is 50 ml or it is 90 ml. It was something. It was taken in there.
Sukriti, nice
Yes.
presentation. Did you differentiate between the types of the cataract, means the grade of the cataract? Because if it is very hard nucleus, the central nuclear portion is very large and you have to then recrack them. So it can lead to loss of, means increased phaco time. So did you differentiate between whether you are getting the same result in grade 2 and you are getting the same result in grade 5?
So
Where
in,
the central nucleus chunk is itself is very large to phaco in a single go rather than recracking them.
yes, sir. Sir, in our study, we are because the patient we took were from grade 4 to grade 5 only. The grade 2 grades were only taken, and we did not take grade 1, 2, or 3. We were for like we did not compare it with grade 1 or grade 2 because we took grade 4 and or grade 5 in both the groups, and that were compared according to LOCS classification. We took
The
from
videos
stamp examination.
video you showed was quite soft cataract actually. So in case of large nuclei in grade 5, where the nucleus is very large, the central core, how you were cracking them, how you were emulsifying them without cracking, how you are cracking the peripheral portion, and how you are getting the
So we are giving multiple peripheral chops, which will free the central nucleus. Then the central nucleus is then chopped into small pieces. Like I think I can go back and show you the video. It is you can.
That's fine. I've seen that video. I do that regularly, but for grade 5, the central nucleus chunk is very big to
Yes,
be
sir.
emulsified after taking off the peripheral chunks actually.
So it is mechanically chopped with chopper. We chop into small pieces and then it is emulsified. So,
Good morning, everybody. I think I agree with Dr. Paul. Dr. Sukriti, very nice presentation, but I agree with Dr. Paul that the periphery is very soft, and if the center remains, then it will move as a block because central is the most hardest. And mechanically, if you try to chop it, then that causes zonular dialysis. So that's all that I want to say.
Sorry to interrupt, sir, but I think the time is up for the first presenter. So we have kept the time
Okay.
as 6 minutes of presentation and 2 minutes of question answers.
Okay.
So to keep it on time and to give our next presenters the equal time, I would request you to please go ahead with our next presenter.
And can we see the timer on the screen, please?
Yeah, the timer is on the screen.
Yeah,
The time has
it
just
is
got
visible.
up. It is getting played on the screen
Okay.
for the next presentation. Also 6 minutes presenting time and last 2 minutes will be for the question and answers from you guys.
Thank you.
Okay. So I would request you to please take up the next presenter.
Dr. Abhishek, is he present?
Dr. Abhishek.
Dr. Abhishek? I think he is not present.
Yeah, Dr. Abhishek is not there. So I think we can
Not
go
present.
ahead.
So Ritu Walvekar can come. Ritu Walvekar,
Good morning, sir.
good morning.
Please share your screen so that the timer can be started.
Yeah.
Is my PPT visible?
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
Good morning, judges. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Ruta Valavalkar, and I'll be presenting my paper named Blood Pressure and Heart Rate Alteration Through Music in Patients Undergoing Cataract Extraction Surgery. There were no financial or other competing interests. The goal of every surgeon is to prevent complications and provide comfort.
Yes.
And provide comfort to the patient as much as possible. Even minor surgical procedures can produce anxiety in patients in anticipation of events that will be unfamiliar and uncomfortable. Intraoperative anxiety can affect patients' post-operative recovery and increase risk for physiological complications. Music is an easily administered, non-threatening, non-invasive, and inexpensive tool to calm pre-operative and intraoperative anxiety. Music has proven over the years to provide comfort from a discomforting condition, familiarity in a strange environment, and distraction from fear, pain, and anxiety. Aims of the study was to find out whether the utilization of the above mentioned properties of music be done effectively in reducing the anxiety among patients undergoing cataract extraction, and also to find out whether the type of anesthesia used will affect the anxiety levels of the patient undergoing cataract surgery while listening to music. In this prospective observational study, 300 patients diagnosed with senile cataract falling in the age group 40 to 80 years were selected. Patients not given medicine fitness, psychiatric condition in the patient, and deaf patients were excluded from the study, along with patients not giving consent. Patients were divided in 3 groups. The music intervention group with topical anesthesia, group A, the music intervention group with local anesthesia, group B, and a control group, no music group, group C. All surgeries were performed by a single surgeon in a duration of 6 months. Along with the routine preoperative investigations, blood pressure and heart rates of all patients were measured and noted down by a single examiner before surgery. Both the music intervention groups were made to listen to classical sitar music during surgery. Phacoemulsification surgery under local anesthesia was performed in all patients except in the topical music intervention group where topical anesthesia was used. Blood pressure and heart rates were measured and noted down by the same examiner post-operatively. The gender-wise distribution was as follows: 50% males and 50% females were present in all the 3 groups. The mean age in 3 groups was about 66 to 68 years. Assessment of clinical parameters in the 3 groups, systolic blood pressure, diastolic blood pressure, and pulse rate were assessed separately in all the 3 groups, in which it was found out that in group A and group B, where music was intervened, post-operatively the blood pressure and heart rates were decreased, whereas in group C, it was significantly increased. Discussion. Our study proved that there was a statistically significant effect of music in normalizing the heart rate and blood pressure. The groups that listened to music showed decrease in blood pressure and heart rate, whereas the group which did not listen to music showed an increase in both the parameters. The group which underwent cataract extraction under topical anesthesia showed more marked stabilizing of blood pressure and heart rates compared to the group undergoing surgery under local anesthesia. No significant effect of gender and age on the clinical parameters was established. Studies have proven that the clinically measurable influence of music on factors such as arterial blood pressure is related to molecular changes regarding opiates and cytokine processes. Also, the distraction that music offers from the surgical procedure has been reported as a favorable effect of music, which becomes even more valuable when patients listen to music of their preference. This may offer them a sense of personal control and reminds them of a familiar home environment. The effect of topical anesthesia on decreasing the anxiety in patients in our study could be due to the lack of discomfort and pain caused due to the peribulbar block. Our study also has a number of limitations. The major limitation was that no cortisol and serological tests were applied to patients. These tests are the most reliable indicators of stress measurement. Additionally, the selected piece of music was determined by the researchers but not by the patients themselves. In conclusion, according to the present findings, we may conclude that music has a stabilizing effect on the blood pressure and heart rates of patients undergoing cataract surgery. Health professionals may be educated appropriately in order to address stress reduction through music for their patients, especially in countries with limited resources and substantial decrease in the health budget, such as India. Every intervention with cost-saving potential is not only welcome, but also necessary. These were my references. Thank you.
Presentation, Doctor. Thank you so much.
As a double-edged sword, medico-legally, if you see whether to make the patient listen music, because the doctor is also listening the music. Simultaneously, what we can do is we can give the headphones to the patient so that the patient can listen and the doctor is concentrating on the surgery.
Yes, ma'am. We had a thought of doing that, but we thought that it may affect the patient's position and comfort while lying down. So that's why we avoided that.
Dr. Ruta, very nice presentation. This is in practice so many places, but in your abstract, you actually divided in 2 groups, isn't it? One group who were exposed to music and one group who were non-exposed to music.
Yeah.
But in your presentation, you have shown 3 groups. So probably it would have been better if you have sub-classified group B, the 25 patients who were exposed to music, you could have sub-classified them between LA and TA. And in your abstract, you have mentioned only LA, you haven't spoken about TA. So your abstract is not matching with your presentation content.
But to advantage, Dr. Anyway, Dr. Ruta, it's not being judged. You know that because you're not a ratified member of the IOS. So, but yeah, what Dr. Sugato is saying is very right. Your abstract should in future always match for any other conference, should match the presentation, what you're presenting. So I think if there are any other questions, we can go ahead with that, or we move on to the next presentation.
Dr. Ruta, I just wanted to ask what was new about this presentation, because it's a known fact that music is a factor which attends the patient. Something new about your study?
It has not been studied in cataract surgeries especially. It has studied in other surgeries. But that's why I chose this for studying cataract in cataract surgery.
Okay, you didn't get any reference regarding the role of music in during cataract surgery?
Not in this part of Western India. Not in Western India.
Thank
you. You find out the literature, you will find it. It is at least 20-year-old thing, but it's a good, you presented it, nicely presented. But it's a very known fact, and even we are using music in ROT, and most of the people are using. So it is in the literature. You please find it out. In the IOS, many.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your presentation, Dr. Ruta. Yeah, we'll move ahead for our next speaker now.
Yes.
So is the next speaker myself, Dr. Swati?
Yeah, Swati, you have to, because Nikhil is gone to some other hall, he will be coming in the last. Swati, you can start.
Okay, so my paper today is about a comparison of the clinical outcomes between image-guided system versus the smartphone digital reference marker app for toric intraocular lens implantation in cataract surgery. No financial disclosures, and the accuracy of the toric IOL depends on the following factors: appropriate patient selection, accuracy of the biometry and keratometry, the calculator being used, the accuracy of the pre-operative reference markings, the IOL placement in the capsular bag, and the rotational stability of the IOL. So for the smartphone assisted digital reference markers, apps like the iToric Patwardhan or the Toricam can be used, which are available online. And the Variant guidance delivers better outcomes than slit lamp assisted conventional manual ink marking techniques in terms of induced astigmatism, as has been proved in various studies earlier. So in this study, we intend to compare between the Varian image-guided system and the iToric smartphone digital reference marker app, the clinical outcomes with respect to uncorrected distance visual acuity, residual astigmatism, and deviation from the target residual astigmatism in a toric IOL cataract surgery. And to our knowledge, there has been no previous published studies or reports of this. So this is a prospective randomized clinical study conducted at a tertiary eye care center. The sample size for the smartphone digital reference marking app was 10, and that for the Variant group was 13. To reduce the confounding variables, a detailed slit lamp evaluation, topography, and OCT was done for every patient, and patients with any ocular surface disorders, corneal or retinal pathologies, or any other eye problems were not included in the study. Keratometry was done on multiple devices, and an integrated K reading was taken in calculation wherever there was a discrepancy in the K readings between the devices. Biometry was performed by immersion method, and Barrett's online toric calculator was used. To reduce any IOL-related confounding factors like rotational stability, Acrysoft IQ toric platform T3 to T9 was used in all the cases. No rotation was encountered in our study, and surgeries were performed by a single surgeon, and no intraoperative complications were encountered. So this is how the smartphone marking was done in the study. And by taking into account the gyroscopic assisted camera rotation, we get the effective mark rotation from the 0 to 180 degree, and then the Mendes ring is accordingly applied. For the Varian image guided group, it automatically corrects for the cyclotorsion by recognizing the scleral landmarks of the iris and limbus. And this was how the Varian helped us in our study. So in this study, we are using the uncorrected visual acuity, best corrected visual acuity, residual astigmatism, and deviation from the target residual astigmatism as a measure of the clinical outcome of toric IOL surgery. The data was entered in Microsoft Excel, and using the software, mean and standard deviation was calculated for the different samples, and unequal variance of independent unpaired t-test was done to analyze for any significant difference between the two groups. So these are the Excel sheets, and we found that the post-operative uncorrected distance visual acuity of all the eyes in both the groups was 6.9 or logMAR 0.18 and better. So the data was tabulated, and the t-value was derived, and as we can see that this mean of the deviation of the residual astigmatism from the target anticipated astigmatism is the best evaluation for post-refractive outcome. So now these t-values were put to the t-test, and it was found to be not significant. So our results demonstrated that there is no significant difference between the UCVA, best corrected visual acuity, and deviation from the anticipated residual astigmatism in both the groups. So using Varian over smartphone app did not lead to any significant improvement with respect to clinical outcomes. Advantages of this current study is that the earlier studies demonstrated a strong agreement between the Varian and the smartphone axis marking, but assumed Varian as the gold standard for accurate alignment of the toric IOLs. But in the considerable advantage in the design of the current study is the ability to independently evaluate and compare the clinical outcomes of the two marking systems. This study provides results obtained by a single surgeon, though this helps eliminate surgeon variables like the surgically induced astigmatism, effective lens position, surgeon-related alignment accuracy. A multivariate evaluation can be performed in the future. So to conclude, smartphone digital reference marking apps are a cheap, consistent, easily available, reproducible way of enhancing outcomes of toric IOLs, but needs a lot of care, precision, and is prone to transcription errors. Varian image guided study aims to make the process of toric IOL alignment more accurate. It enhances the surgical flow, especially in a high volume centers, but due to its high cost, it may not be an economically viable option for the majority of ophthalmologists. And there is no significant difference in uncorrected distance visual acuity, residual refractive astigmatism, or deviation from the target anticipated residual astigmatism between the image-guided digital marking group versus the smartphone digital reference marking group in toric IOL surgery. I would like to acknowledge Dr. Saurabh Patwardhan for his iToric app and Dr. Siddharth Gupta for the statistical courtesy. These are the references. Thank you.
Thank you,
Dr. Swati, very nice presentations.
Thank you, sir.
And especially you have ruled out the differences between the two groups by your process. So nice presentation, and I hope your presentation will help lot of doctors who are not capable or cannot afford buying Varian. So thank you. Nice presentation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Swati, nice presentation.
Thank you, sir.
Between these two systems, how do you compare these two image-guided system and the smartphone with the manual one? Manual, do you have any idea?
Yes, sir.
How is the difference?
Yes, sir. So they have the manual ones have been done in multiple studies earlier, and they have been compared with the Varian and the smartphones. So that was not a new study, and they've shown an error of around 4 to 6 degrees plus minus 2. So that has already been said that there is a strong difference, but Varian, the smartphone was already held comparable to the Varian in most of the earlier studies. So in this study, we've shown that the clinical efficiency is equal. And when those conventional manual marking techniques are showing to do an error, then we don't actually now need to do the conventional manual marking techniques. Rather, we can upgrade to the smartphone digital marking apps, which is so easily available in everyone's hand free of cost. So that is the aim of the study.
Basically, the conventional one is because of the different person, when two person or two different person do it, it is because the errors, technical errors while doing marking the error. So what are the chances of error in your technique?
So the chances of error we've done, this thing is there's no chances of error. Pardon, sir?
Person to person error. Person to person error.
Person to person error with the smartphone. So the smartphone, it is a digitally reference marker. So there is not supposed to be any person to person error. It will, that can always happen with the Varian also, and that can happen with the surgeries also, sir. So the precision of the surgeon will always be there for any surgery or any surgeon. So we need to definitely take care of on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Swati, what is the learning curve for using the smartphone thing? Is it very easy or?
Sir, it's very easy for people. It's just like an app. It's so simple.
So that will be very useful for using in day-to-day clinical practice, isn't it?
Yes, sir. I mean, it's much easier. It's just an app. You just have to open and take a photograph with that app and draw protractor through the central pupil and the limbal mark. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very
sir.
much.
Thank you, sir.
So, sir, we have a request from Dr. Abhishek. He wants to join now since his audio was not working before. So, Dr. Tiwari would like to ask you if you
Yes. He can present. Yes.
He can present. Okay.
Yes. He can present.
Dr. Abhishek, you can present and you can just unmute yourself.
Good morning, sir, ma'am. Sorry for the inconvenience caused.
Presenter number 2. So, yeah.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, you are audible.
Thank you, sir. So is my screen visible?
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, everyone. My topic of paper presentation today is effect of heparinized irrigating solution during cataract surgery on postoperative inflammation. My paper presentation code is FP722. No financial interest. Techniques of extracapsular cataract extraction have changed over the years. Earlier, it was conventional method, then manual SICS, then phacoemulsification, now femtolaser assisted cataract extraction. Intraocular surgery is an ocular trauma. There is breakdown of blood aqueous barrier and release of prostaglandin. Postoperative inflammation continues to be a cause of patient's pain and discomfort. Suboptimal visual acuity following postoperative inflammation may be due to cystoid macular edema. Heparin is a well-known anticoagulant. Apart from being anticoagulant, it is also anti-inflammatory and has anti-proliferative effects. It inhibits fibrin formation after intraocular surgery and also shown to inhibit fibroblast activity, hence reducing postoperative inflammation. The rationale for our study was there were various studies in the Western countries that showed heparin will reduce postoperative inflammation. However, though this modification is simple without any extra expenditure, we wanted to see the results in Indian population where the iris were highly pigmented. Our aim was to evaluate the role of heparin in reducing postoperative inflammation in cataract surgery. Objectives were to document postoperative inflammation and cellular reaction after cataract surgery, to grade and compare the severity of inflammation and cellular reaction with heparin and without heparin, and to document any complication arising after using heparin. Study was conducted in our department and done by a single experienced surgeon under standard condition. This was a hospital-based cohort study since we had follow-up. The sample size was 60 eyes in each group. There were 2 groups. All the patients admitted for cataract surgery after analyzing from exclusion and inclusion criteria were randomized into 2 groups. Group 1, 60 patients who underwent cataract surgery with heparinized irrigating solution, and group 2 containing 60 patients undergoing cataract surgery without heparinized irrigating solution, that is plain balanced salt solution. The inclusion criteria was patients of age group around 30 years or more undergoing cataract surgery. The cause of vision was being cataract. Exclusion criteria: patients with ocular disease like uveitis and glaucoma, complicated cataract, history of ocular surgeries or trauma in the past, patients with pseudoexfoliation and posterior synechiae, patients who are on pilocarpine therapy, patients with bleeding tendencies and known history of using systemic anticoagulants, and patients not consenting to study. After taking institutional ethical committee clearance and consent from each patient, patients were subjected to surgery. During surgery, group 1, patients received heparinized irrigating solution. 5 ml of heparin containing 5,000 units were added to 500 ml of balanced salt solution. And the second group received plain balanced salt solution. All the patients underwent cataract extraction by phacoemulsification by a single experienced surgeon using superior clear corneal incision using 2.8 mm keratome. Post-operatively, patients were assessed on day 1, day 15, day 28, and 8 weeks. Visual acuity, inflammatory reaction using slit lamp examination for assessment of anterior chamber cells, flare, and pigment dispersion. Post-operative, if any complications arise, were noted. This was how it was done. 5 fields were selected, and then using 1 mm into 1 mm oblique slit lamp beam, anterior chamber cells, flare, and pigments were recorded. For data analysis, statistical analysis was done using chi-square test, Mann-Whitney U-test, Wilcoxon signed rank test, and the software used were SPSS 24.0 version and GraphPad Prism 7.0 version. Coming to the results, in our study, the maximum people belong to age group of 61 to 70 years. And in group where heparin was used, male was 70% and female contributed to 30%. However, in patients where heparin was not used, there was equal distribution of gender. Coming to anterior chamber cells, when we compare patients who received heparin and who did not receive heparin, we can see that in the immediate post-operative period, that is on day 1 and day 15, it shows statistically significant values indicating that patients who received heparin had significantly less reaction. However, on late post-operative days, that is on day 28 and 8 weeks, it was not significant. Similar trends were seen in anterior chamber flare and iris pigment dispersion also, indicating early post-operative reaction was quite less when heparin was used. Post-operative inflammation is mainly because of surgical trauma to blood aqueous barriers and release of prostaglandins. In order to reduce bias, all the surgeries were conducted by a single surgeon and the techniques were standardized. Since in SICS, there is some amount of iris handling, it could act as a confounding factor in our study, and hence we resorted to phacoemulsification only. Study by Dandona et al. Showed that heparin prevents production of reactive oxygen species by leukocyte, hence reducing inflammation. All these have led to the invention of heparin-coated IOLs, which are used in pediatric surgeries and in patients with uveitis, cystic uveitis, so that there is lesser post-operative reaction. Studies by Kruger et al. Also showed that heparin, when used in a concentration of 10 international units per ml, reduced post-operative inflammation. Various studies have been conducted. Another study is Yasser Iqbal et al., who also concluded that using heparin will reduce early post-operative inflammation. In our study, no intraoperative complications such as iris bleeding, etc., were encountered. So we can safely say that using heparin at a concentration of 10 international units per ml is quite safe for intraocular surgeries. Similar results were also achieved in a study conducted by Kruger et al. Hence, we can conclude that to implement heparin in irrigating motion to reduce post-operative inflammatory reaction.
I would like to interrupt you. The time is up, so we'll be now moving ahead for the question and answers.
Okay, ma'am.
We have 6 minutes for everyone, for all the presenters. So now we'll move ahead for the judges' question and answer.
Sure, ma'am.
Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer. Sure, ma'am. Question and answer.
Okay, only one comment I would like to make. Nice presentation, but you need to stick to time, especially in international and national presentation, and especially if it is a competitive presentation.
Yes, I'll improve on that, sir.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with Dr. Paul. It's very important, especially in international conferences.
Because you will get lot of marks deducted in any international presentation if you not stick to time.
Yeah, at least 1/4 of marks. So, Abhishek?
Yes, sir.
Did you find any reduction in the tasks?
Actually, sir, because of the time he has exceeded 8 minutes, I think we will not be able to.
Yes. And he will not be evaluated as well because he is a non-notified member. I think he knows it.
Yes,
Abhishek,
sir, yes,
he will not be judged.
Yes,
you know
sir.
it?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you. We can go on to next speaker.
Please stop sharing your slide.
Yes, sir.
Before the next speaker starts, how will we know that the timer is over? Is it 3 buzzes or?
Okay. So the first buzzer is going to be at 5 minutes. That is a warning buzzer. The second buzzer will be 10 seconds before 6 minutes are over. So that is like the second buzzer is going to be the final buzzer, and then you'll see time up on the screen. So 6 minutes will be.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Next speaker is Pavitra Patel.
Yes, I'll just share my screen. Can I start, sir?
Yes, you can start.
Good morning, everyone. At the outset, none of the authors have any financial interest. I'm Dr. Pavitra Patel, and the topic for my today's presentation is thinking out of the box. So, one second. Thinking out of the box reverse optic capture for rotational stability in toric intraocular lens. So it is a well-known fact that toric IOLs tend to have poor rotational stability, especially in high myopes with an axial length of more than 25 millimeters. And it can be clearly seen in this animation that toric IOLs remain stable in eyes with normal axial length, and they tend to rotate in eyes with axial length of more than 25 millimeters. So for every degree of misalignment, about 3.3% of the lens cylinder power is lost. And hence 30 degrees of rotation will lead to complete loss of toricity of the intraocular lens. And there are ways by which we can maintain the stability of intraocular lens, the most common method being the use of capsular tension ring. However, there are few published data which also reveals that despite implanting CTR, there was rotational instability seen. So what extra could have been done for these cases? So we came up with our research question that was, can reverse optic capture of toric IOLs improve the post-operative stability in high myopes? So all these patients, and the aim of our study was to highlight the outcomes of a novel technique of reverse optic capture for improved rotational stability of intraocular lens. So all these patients who underwent toric IOL implantation with CTR, they were tested for refractive status keratometry and dilated slit lamp evaluation to assess the alignment of toric IOL. So this was a prospective interventional study which included 25 eyes with rotational instability of more than 15 degrees, who had an axial length of more than 25 millimeters, who had a toricity of IOL T3 and above, had a rhexis between 5 to 5.5 mm, and had a CTR implanted earlier. And the exclusion criteria was patients who had zonular weakness or those who had intraoperative complications that could affect the IOL stability. So ROC was done at 2 weeks post-operatively. And this is an animation to mainly explain how reverse optic capture was done. So it is a procedure in which the haptics, they remain in the bag and the optic is brought into the ciliary sulcus. To rest on the rhexis margin. So written informed consent was taken prior to the surgery. Surgery was done by the same surgeon, and Alcon Acrisoft toric IOL was used for all these patients. The implantation was done by a 2.2 millimeter of incision. For the toric IOLs that had rotated, we re-rotate the IOL to the axis of implantation and then bring one edge of the optic, as seen in this video, onto the rhexis margin. And then after ensuring the alignment, the other edge of the IOL was also brought into the anterior to the rhexis margin, keeping the haptics basically in the bag. So what were our results? This graph basically represents number of eyes per toric model. So out of 25 eyes, 9 eyes had T3 toricity, 5 eyes had T4, 7 had T5, 1 eye had T6, and 3 eyes had T7 toricity. Now, this graph represents post-operative uncorrected distance visual acuity following toric IOL with CPR. And in this graph, we can see that about 11 eyes had a UDV of 6/12, 8 had a UDV of 6/18, and 3 even had a UDV of 6/24. Now, all these 25 eyes had a misalignment of more than 15 degrees post-toric this thing. So now post-reverse optic capture, we saw a statistically significant change in the post-operative UDVA, wherein we saw that around 23 eyes had a uncorrected distance visual acuity of 6/6, and 2 had a uncorrected distance visual acuity of 6/9. So post-ROC, basically this graph shows us about the degree of misalignment of the toric IOL post-ROC. So all of these patients, they showed a residual astigmatism of 23 eyes had less than 5 degrees, and 2 eyes had a residual astigmatism with a degree of misalignment between 5 to 10 degrees. And all of these patients had a residual astigmatism less than 0.5 post reverse optic capture. So to conclude, the toric IOL rotation has been positively correlated with longer axial lengths and larger capsular bags, and consequently, the larger capsular bags. So reverse optic capture can be done simply and quickly in these patients while implanting toric IOLs in high myopes, which does not require any more extra time or instrumentation than for a routine surgical repositioning. And the only indication of where the ROC can be done, the prerequisite basically is an intact central capsular rhexis, which is slightly smaller than the optic diameter of the IOL, which is normally the ideal size of the rhexis that most surgeons aim for. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Pavitra. Sir, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Pavitra, do you recommend reverse optic capture as a standard procedure, and do you do it in your practice for patients with high axial length and toric implantation?
So basically in this study, that was the main aim, to see whether CTR implantation, was it really helpful in maintaining the rotational stability. And we could really see the difference of how the rotational stability was maintained after reverse optic capture. So if you have enough, if you're a skilled surgeon and if you really want a good outcome in your toric IOL patients for your high myopes, this is a procedure that could be made standard for our clinical practice. We do it now routinely, not routinely as in whichever high myope patient is undergoing high toric IOL basically. So we would really recommend it.
Okay, so as a secondary procedure where there is rotational instability, you documented it in that particular case, it would be a good idea. But you're saying that you're doing it as a routine. If that is the case, do you recommend any adjustment to the IOL power calculation? Because theoretically, the effective lens position would lift anteriorly, and there would be theoretically a myopic shift. So do you recommend that?
So we saw the effective lens position. There was a shift of 0.5, 0.75, not much, because here the
0.5 in today's surgery is a lot.
But sir, the misalignment that was seen in these patients, that was more than 15 degrees. So that was more, that was intolerable by the patient as compared to the shift of 0.5.
Pavitra, I'm talking about prospectively doing as a routine.
Prospectively, yes.
So we can really give for IOL power calculation, what would you recommend?
We can take a 0.5 less when calculating the IOL power. We can always reduce the IOL power by 0.5.
Okay.
Because it is not entirely in the sulcus, sir.
Okay.
The haptics are still in the
It's partly
Rex's
midway.
bag,
Yeah.
capsular bag. Yeah.
Right.
Pavitra, if you have a small PCR in the central and everything is okay, would you like to go ahead with this procedure or not?
We haven't
If you have a
tried, but
PCR,
we have not tried yet, sir. But there are published data where they have used reverse optic capture even in small central, basically posterior capsular tear. So it's a known fact that it has been done, but we haven't tried as of now.
So I think I would
Mitra,
be
what about-
interrupting
Yeah.
now because the time is up for the questions and we have our next presenter ready to present.
yes, we can go.
Yeah, we can go ahead with the next presenter.
Thank you.
Nikhil RP. Dr. Nikhil RP, are you here?
Yes,
Nikhil
sir.
will be. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Please start. Present your screen, please.
Is my screen visible, sir?
Yes.
Just 1 second, sir. I'll just start with the. Can I start the presentation, sir?
Yes, you can start.
Very good morning to one and all present here. My topic for presentation is a new IOL marker for intraoperative alignment of toric IOLs in small pupil during phacosurgery. The Dr. Sri Ganesh and Dr. Sheetal Brar are consultants to Carl Zeiss Meditech, Germany, and the rest authors have no financial disclosure. Spectacle-free cataract surgery is the main goal of modern cataract surgery. Approximately 20 to 30% of the patients undergoing cataract surgery have corneal astigmatism of 1.25 diopters or higher. 10% of the patients have 2 diopters or higher. Astigmatism of more than 1.5 diopters are better corrected by toric intraocular lenses. Placement of this toric intraocular lenses in cases of small pupil poses a challenge because of poor visibility of the toric marks, often leading to misalignment. Causes of small pupil are senile miosis, pseudoexfoliation, diabetic patients, intraoperative floppy iris syndrome patients on alpha-adrenergic blockers, uveitis, and now recently because of the excessive use of femtosecond laser, which even releases prostaglandins, leading to small pupil. Some of the difficulties for toric IOL in small pupils are, since the marks are not visible, which leads to excessive manipulation, leading to increased prostaglandin release and iris pigment release and iris and wound manipulation, leading to increased surgical time and increased postoperative inflammation and IOP. To overcome this thing, Dr. Ganesh developed a new device called the Ganesh toric IOL marker. It is made up of titanium. It has a lower end plate with having 2 slit windows and a 3 mm long linear projection with a ridge. The slit windows are used to guide the placement of an indentation mark on the optic of the IOL. Once phacoemulsification is done, the toric marks on the IOL are aligned with the slit windows, and the instrument is gently pressed on the optic of the IOL. Thereby, a mark is indented on the optic of the IOL for about 10 to 15 seconds. The mark stays for around approximately 3 minutes. Then the IOL is loaded into the cartridge and injected into the capsular bag. The linear mark is then aligned externally using the Callisto overlay or the external marks, whichever has been used. On postoperative day 1, there were no marks or scratches on the IOL. Retracing was done using eye trace. We found 0-degree rotation, and on the HDA showed no significant scattering. We conducted a study to evaluate the feasibility of using a new marker, IOL marker for the intraoperative alignment. And we enrolled 50 patients, out of which we made into 2 groups. One is the marker group and the control group. Patients were evaluated at post-op 1 week, 1 month, and 3 months for the rotational stability and visual and refractive outcomes. At 1 week, the marker group showed a mean rotation of 2.51 degrees, whereas the control group showed mean rotation of 7.4 degrees. 5 eyes had a rotation of greater than 10 degrees at 1 week, and out of which 3 eyes were re-rotated. At 1 month, the marker group had a mean rotation of 2.54 degrees, whereas the control group had mean rotation of 7.12 degrees. Coming to the UDVA, the marker group had UDVA of 0.03, whereas logMAR, whereas the control group had 0.20, which was 0.22, which is significant. And coming to cylinder, the marker group had a cylinder of minus 0.08, whereas the control group had cylinder of minus 0.38, which is again significant. 80% of the eyes in the marker group had UDVA of 20/20 or better, whereas in control group, 68% of the eyes had UDVA of 20/25 or better at 1 week. At 1 month, 92% of the eyes in marker group had UDVA of 20/20 or better, whereas in control group, after the re-rotation, it was 84% of the eyes in control group had UDVA better than 20/25. 96% of the eyes in the marker group had a spherical equivalent refraction of plus or minus 0.5 at 1 week, whereas in control group, 64% of the eyes had plus or minus 0.5 diopters. At 1 month, the marker group remained the same, whereas the control group increased to 76%. 96% of the eyes in the marker group had a cylinder less than 0.5 diopters, whereas in control group, it was 64% at 1 week. And at 1 month, marker group remained the same, whereas the control group had 76% less than 0.5 diopters. But total 96% were less than 1 diopters in control group. Coming to the rotational stability, 96% of the eyes had rotation or were within 5 degrees of rotation in the marker group, whereas in control group at 1 week, there were around 60% of the eyes at 6 to 10 degrees and 20% of the eyes within 11 to 15 degrees. At 1 month, since rotation was done in the control group, the percentage increased to 72% of the eyes in 6 to 10 degrees, and whereas 8% in 11 to 15 degrees. Coming to the IOP, we even checked IOP and post-op inflammation at day 1. Marker group had less IOP and control group had a little moderate IOP, but IOP was within normal limits. Whereas coming to inflammation, marker group had a minimal inflammation, whereas control group had more inflammation, 2 pluses. The conventional manual marking methods such as the bubble, pendular, or tonometer markers are prone to error due to smudging or dissolution of the ink excessively. And the newer techniques like image-guided femtosec laser capsule mark, iris fingerprinting are new techniques, but these are having own limitations like cost. So advantages of this device is it reduces post-op inflammation, less pigment dispersion, less post-op cylinder, and less IOL rotation. To conclude, in our experience, we find the Ganesh IOL marker simple, safe, reproducible, and effective tool. With the use of this simple tool, we can significantly improve visual outcomes, satisfaction, and lesser post-operative complications in our patients having small pupil. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil. Nice presentation. How did you measure rotation post-operatively in a contracted pupil? Because after 24 hours, there was no mark on the lens.
Yes, sir.
And you can't see the marks on the lens as well. So
we checked it using eye trace, sir.
You checked in what?
Eye trace, sir.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other question, please?
Hello, Dr.
Yes,
Nikhil.
Yes, sir.
The IOL, the marks on the IOL,
yes,
the reason for this study is that while implanting, the pupil is small,
yes,
and you're not able to see the IOL marks,
yes, sir,
right? So as to align them with the reference marks.
Yes, sir.
And that's why you make an impression, or
yes,
rather you ink it. Not even, you should not say indentation mark, it's an ink, you are inking it.
Yes, sir.
So indentation would be a plain non-inked mark, okay?
Yes,
so
sir.
you're actually inking it.
Yes,
so
sir.
when that ink mark disappears after a few minutes, maybe a
yes,
minute,
sir.
you say,
yes,
next day, Dr. Tiwari is asking, next day when you're seeing, how do you do the alignment? Because the pupil is anyway obscuring your reference, your IOL marks.
Sir, we check using this eye trace, sir. So once if the eye trace and AR also we check, sir. If these two things,
the AR is giving you the refraction, okay, the astigmatism.
Yes,
how are the IOL marks aligned? How is the IOL aligned? How do you know that?
How the eye trace is going to give the access? Doesn't tell
that will give you the net refractive astigmatism. No, it will not tell you whether the IOL marks are aligned properly or not as per your reference mark.
Unless you see the marks, eye trace is not seeing. Huh? It is giving the final calculation.
That's giving the net refractive astigmatism. It's giving, no?
Yes, sir.
It's an indirect evidence, not the direct evidence that your lens is aligned.
Post-operatively also the pupil will be little small, but
yeah, that's true. Because if the pupil is not dilating during surgery, obviously it will not dilate afterwards as well.
Because if you could not manage to see during the surgery, post-operatively next day, it's going to be even lesser, in fact, no?
Yes, sir.
So how was this done? Maybe you should maybe you should get back and check and
Yes.
understand.
Yes,
Okay.
Because you have mentioned that it was aligned.
Yes, sir.
It group in this group, it was better aligned.
Yes, sir.
Comparison to other group, right? So this has to be proved.
Yes, sir.
If it is not true, you should not include into the study. You should be based on the post-operative reflection.
Yes, sir.
Not in the alignment. Okay.
We use the iTrace and AR, sir, but as you said,
iTrace will only give the final outcome of the reflection. No?
Yes, sir.
It will not show the alignment.
Nikhil,
So sorry to interrupt, sir. I think with the time.
But it's a very nice presentation. Just
very nice presentation.
Especially in those patients who are perioperatively dilating well, but during the operation the pupil is coming down.
Yes,
in those patients, this will work very well because you can then calculate the realignment post-operatively because they will dilate again well.
Yes,
but very nice presentation, Nikhil, and will help in the day-to-day practice. It will definitely help.
No, I'd like to say that for the purpose of implantation on the table, when we lose the marks and the pupil constricts, and you are wondering what to do, how to implant, at least that stage is very well taken care of. But when the next day what you're saying, how do you evaluate? You should go back and check with your
Probably the study should have been done in those patients in whom the pupil is dilating well preoperatively, but paraoperatively is closing down.
Constrict. Yes.
To do the study in those patients, it will give much more accurate result.
Yes, sir.
At least paraoperative, it is quite accurate.
Yes, sir.
You can be very sure during the surgery.
It's a great tool, actually.
Okay, we have to move on to the next speaker because the time is up.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so
much. Dr. Sheth is presenting. Dr. Siddharth Sheth in place of Dr. Smitesh Shah.
Dr.
Siddharth Sheth had requested that he'll be presenting in place of Dr. Smitesh Shah.
Yes.
I had two presentations, sir.
Please continue.
I'll present the first one. I'll share the first screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My topic for free paper presentation is effect of glare on contrast sensitivity subjects implanted with trifocal IOLs. Me or any other authors don't have any financial disclosure to make. Multifocal IOLs such as extended depth of focus or trifocal IOLs are good options to manage pseudophakic presbyopia. Implantation of multifocal IOL has positive impact on patients' quality of life post-operatively, with improved visual outcomes and quality of life index. Previous studies have reported that trifocal IOL designs provide good near, intermediate, and distance visual performances and increase spectacle independence as compared to bifocal or the traditional multifocal IOLs. Many of the patients implanted with multifocal IOLs complain of photic phenomena such as halos and glare. Glare is a condition where it affects contrast sensitivity in both mesopic as well as photopic conditions, and thus may affect the quality of life for daily activities like driving. So we plan to evaluate the effect of glare on contrast sensitivity in eyes implanted with trifocal IOL. It was a prospective study. Subjects who were implanted with trifocal IOL, Eclipse of IQ Panoptics or a triphobic IOL by CARE group were included in the study. There were 66 eyes with Panoptics IOL implantation and 85 eyes with triphobic IOL implantation included for the study. The mean age in the Panoptics group was 58.79 years and was in triphobic group 54.45 years. So including criteria included subjects implanted with trifocal IOL, subjects aged between 40 to 70 years, and best corrected post-operative 1 month visual acuity of better than 0.2 log margins. Exclusion criteria included pre-op corneal astigmatism of more than 0.75 diopters, IOP of more than 22 millimeters of mercury, any other ocular comorbidities, intra or post-operative complications, cases where source optical biometry was not possible, and patients who lost the follow-up before 1 month. So contrast assessment was done with the help of instrument CSV 1000 HGT, which uses halogen glare source. Here we evaluated the contrast using 4 different spatial frequencies, 3, 6, 12, and 18, which can be seen in the diagram as A, B, C, and D, respectively. The contrast was checked with as well as without the source of glare. And glare actually is automatically calibrated by the machine, and with the help of the numbers rated here 1 to 8, whatever point patient is not able to differentiate between the plane and the graded card, that is the point which is taken as the contrast sensitivity function. So this is the line diagram which is showing the contrast sensitivity with and without the glare in both panoptics as well as the triphobic group. Here in this line diagram with the panoptics, we can see the contrast sensitivity with glare is reduced at the spatial frequency of 3, 6, 12, and 18. Although the statistical significance was not there for the frequencies of 12 and 18, in triphobic group, the contrast sensitivity function was reduced at all the frequencies. So as I already mentioned, the contrast sensitivity was in the panoptics group was mainly reduced at the spatial frequency of 3 and 6, whereas in triphobic group, it was reduced at all the frequencies. So coming to the discussion part, the contrast sensitivity function is more complete performance related measure of the functional quality of vision. We use CSV HGT machine, which is a reliable and common tool in clinical practice to evaluate the effect of glare on contrast sensitivity. In the present study, we observed that contrast sensitivity function with or without glare in eyes with trifocal IOLs followed actually a similar pattern which was studied in previous studies for normal objects or eyes that are implanted with monofocal IOLs. This pattern is basically a classic low spatial frequency roll-off at 3 CPD. That is at 3 spatial frequency, the contrast sensitivity dips, and again it picks up at the 6 CPD, followed by again a dip at the spatial frequency of 12 and 18, which is seen in normal patients as well as patients with monofocal IOLs, and similar pattern we have seen in trifocal IOLs also. So most of we attributed this effect of similar pattern in trifocal IOL to the trifocal designs. Most of the multifocal or trifocal IOLs have diffraction either less than 4 mm or more than 5 mm. The smaller diffractive zones result in compromised intermediate or near vision performance in low light conditions, and large diffractive zones result in compromised distance vision in mesopic conditions. Panoptics IOL has a diffractive zone of 4.5 mm, which is a less pupil dependent diameter, and it is not much dependent on light condition, unlike the previous multifocal IOL. This could be one of the reasons that we did not find much effect of glare on contrast sensitivity in eyes implanted with Panoptics IOL. The contrast sensitivity was reduced at all spatial frequency in eyes implanted with triphobic IOL. This could be attributed to the design of the IOL. To conclude, overall, even though contrast sensitivity was found to be reduced in presence of glare in Panoptics and triphobic group, clinically significant and was comparable to contrast sensitivity function obtained in previous studies. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So we can
Any
go
question for the paper?
and answers, yes, from the judges.
You have your next paper as well. You can go to your next paper then. Ashu, you have any question?
No, I would just like to say that very interesting study. And so effectively, if you want to summarize, there was a difference in the IOL performance.
Yes, sir.
And but do you think it's significant enough or not?
Sir, clinically, when we actually inquired with the questionnaire to the patient regarding the clinical or day-to-day life, it was not significant, but statistically it was significant
at 2 spatial frequencies.
Yeah,
it was.
yeah,
3 and 6. Yeah. but in real life terms, it probably does not impact much.
Yes.
Well, that's good to know. That's good to know. I think you can start with the next paper. We'll save time.
Oh, sure.
Excuse me, sir. If you're done with it, I am a speaker for actually the second presentation was mine. I was in another hall for the same. So can I have a slot?
Let him continue.
Let him
I'm sorry.
finish.
I'm sorry.
Just a minute, sir. I'll start my second presentation.
Yeah, you can start.
Actually, I have to stop sharing the screen.
Dr. Sanita, you're next anyway. In terms of sequence also, it is after his presentation. He has 2 presentations.
Okay, sir. I was not in the hall.
It's okay. It's okay. No problem. No problem.
Thank you.
Dr. Sheth, you can start sharing now.
Loading the other PPT, sir. Just a minute.
Okay.
Is it visible? My screen is visible?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'll start with my second free paper, which is actually modulation transfer function and higher order aberrations in eyes implanted with trifocal IOL. It was a subpart of the first study. So again, I don't have any financial disclosures to make for this study. So presently, there are various multifocal lenses which are commonly used for presbyopic correction in subjects with and without cataract and include bifocal, extended range of vision and trifocal IOLs. Bifocal IOL provides uncorrected distance and near vision and sacrifices the intermediate vision. Extended depth of focus IOL provides continuous range of uncorrected vision over intermediate to far distances. However, in recent years, trifocal IOLs have gained a lot of attention due to its ability to provide excellent uncorrected far, intermediate and near visual acuity. And also it increases the spectacle independence as compared to traditional bifocal IOLs. So the IOL which we evaluated for this study was Acrisoft IQ Panoptix lens, which is only the only US FDA approved trifocal lens. It's a single pin lens with refractive aspheric trifocal design. It's a hydrophobic lens. The only IOL that provides intermediate vision at 60 centimeter, which is typical distance for computer monitors and smartphones. The IOL designed with Enlighten technology that allows the redistribution of intermediate focal points at 120 centimeter to distance. Thus, results in higher transmission of light, unlike the other trifocal. So, what was the need for this study? Because previous studies have reported quality of life and visual outcome parameters in eyes implanted with Panoptix IOL. However, there is limited information about higher order aberration and optical image quality metrics such as modulation transfer function in subjects implanted with Panoptix IOL. So, the purpose of this study was to evaluate modulation transfer function, which is basically a ratio of image contrast to object contrast, and higher order aberrations in eyes implanted with trifocal IOL. It was a prospective study done at a western part of the India. Subjects included patients implanted with trifocal IOL, Acrisoft IQ Panoptix, and monofocal IOL Technis ZCB00 was included as a control group in this study. Sample set included 85 eyes with Panoptix IOL implantation and 20 eyes with monofocal Technis IOL implantation. Mean age in Panoptix group was 54.45 years and in Technis group was 57.50 years. Inclusion criteria was similar to the previous presentation, where we included the subjects implanted with trifocal and monofocal IOL, age group of 40 to 70 years, and best corrected post-operative visual acuity at 1 month of better than 0.2 logMAR units. Exclusion criteria, we excluded patients with pre-op corneal astigmatism of more than 0.75 diopter, IOP of more than 22 millimeters of mercury, any other ocular comorbidities, intra or post-operative complication, cases where swept source optical biometry was not possible, and patients who lost to follow-up before 1 month. So, modulation transfer function and higher order aberrations were evaluated using Hoya eye test aberrometer. Higher order aberrations of third order, fourth order, and fifth order were evaluated. Modulation transfer function, which is a software incorporated into eye test aberrometer, was used to obtain the modulation transfer function at special frequencies of 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and 30 cycles per degree. And all this measurement was done at fixed pupil size of 4 millimeters. In our study, internal higher order aberrations such as comma, trefoil, tetrafoil, secondary astigmatism, pentafoil, secondary comma, and secondary trefoil were similar in both the IOL groups, and it was not statistically significant. And internal higher order aberrations obtained were similar in both the IOL groups. The modulation transfer function at all frequencies were again similar with Panoptix lens as well as the monofocal Tecnis IOL. So coming to the discussion part, higher order aberrations are small but more complex refractive errors that cannot be corrected by glasses and yet responsible for degradation of retinal image quality. In this study, we evaluated the higher order aberrations that are arising due to the IOL component of the eye, which were similar in both trifocal and monofocal IOL groups, suggesting similar image quality with trifocal and monofocal IOL included in this study. The Enlighten technology used in Panoptix IOL allows the redistribution of light from the first step at 120 centimeters to the distance, and thus allowing maximum light utilization for far distance, and thus minimizing the higher order aberrations. Modulation transfer function is another optical image quality metric that describes the ratio of image contrast to object contrast as a function of spatial frequencies. In the present study, modulation transfer function is the mean of image to object contrast ratio at different spatial frequencies, which was noted to be similar in both the IOL groups. So higher order aberration and modulation transfer functions, which are basically pupil dependent parameters, we made the pupil size fixed at 4 millimeters while doing the examination. And previous studies have reported that increase in higher order aberration is associated with increase in pupil size, whereas decrease in the image quality, and thus modulation transfer function with increase in pupil size and spatial frequencies. So to conclude, the internal higher order aberrations and modulation transfer function are similar in Panoptix and Tecnis monofocal IOL groups in our study. This finding could be attributed to Enlighten optical technology that is used by the Panoptix IOL group, where majority of the light energy is redirected from intermediate to the distance to far distance, and thus reducing the higher order aberrations and improving the image quality. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddharth. Any question, please?
No, thank you.
We can go to next speaker, Dr. Saritha.
Please start your presentation.
Hello? Yeah.
Anita.
Good morning, sir. Is the achieved IOL position in pseudophakic eyes a predictor of post-operative spherical equivalent? Now, financial interest. So improving refractive outcomes in cataract surgery has been focused on improving the measurements and improvements in IOL formula. And in 1992, Olsen states that 2/3 of prediction errors were due to biometry errors. By 2008, it is less than 1/3. So we have hugely improved on measurement part. And again,
Sanita, just stop for a second.
Yes, sir.
The timer is showing wrong timer. So can we reset the timer and let her start again?
Yes, sir.
Please reset the timer. It was only showing 30 seconds. Yeah, you can start now.
Yeah.
Okay. Is the achieved IOL position in pseudophakic eyes a predictor of post-operative spherical equivalent? So, improving refractive outcomes in cataract surgery has been focused on improving the pre-op measurements and improvements in IOL formula. In 1992, Olsen states that 2/3 of
Sorry to
biometry
interrupt you,
errors.
ma'am.
Interrupt again, yes.
Sorry to interrupt you, ma'am. Please,
Timer is-
on your video.
1 minute. Should I start again?
No, just one, hold on for how much time should be given? 6 minutes. So please set
6
the timer
minutes.
to 6, not 7. Please set the timer to 6 minutes, please. Yeah, and you can start now.
Okay. Is the
Please on your video, ma'am.
On your video, and I would request everyone else to keep mute, please, because there are a lot of background disturbances for the presenter.
Yes, sir.
Can I start? Can I start, sir?
Yes.
Yes, you can start.
Yeah. Is the achieved IOL position in
When it is 7
pseudophakic eyes a predictor of post-operative spherical equivalent? Improvements in refractive outcomes in cataract surgery have been focused more on preoperative measurements and improvements in IOL formula. In 1992, Olsen states that 2/3 of the errors in prediction was because of biometry errors, whereas in 2008, it has hugely come down to less than 1/3 about biometry errors. So this has hugely improved the refractive outcomes. But no single formula is useful in all circumstances because the anterior segment is not always proportional to the axial length as seen in the Holiday schema. So current improvements in IOL power calculation are due to improvement in predictability of the ELP or effective lens position, and different formulae are more accurate in different anterior segment types. So Holiday has also given a quadratic solution to the axial length Vergennes formula for calculating effective lens position. The aim of our study was to measure the variability in pseudophakic lens position and its impact on the post-operative refraction in normal eyes according to the Holiday schema. This was a single-arm interventional case series which included consecutive patients with uncomplicated cataract, including the normal axial lengths 22 to 26 and keratometry 41 to 47. Those with comorbidities, trauma, and previous surgery were excluded, and all the surgeries were performed as topical temporal microincision phaco by a single surgeon with a back single piece aspheric hydrophobic acrylic foldable implantation. So these were the terms which we used. Predicted spherical equivalent, which was measured from the pre-op biometry. We used OA 2000 biometer and the formula was Barrett Universal 2. Effective lens position was calculated by post-op biometry and using Holiday's quadratic equation. Achieved lens position was assessed using by post-operative biometry and the position of the IOL at 5 weeks. Achieved spherical equivalent was from post-operative refraction. So the study hypothesis, when effective lens position is comparable or equal to the achieved lens position, the predicted spherical equivalent is the achieved spherical equivalent. This is the ideal situation. But when you have a myopic error, when the effective lens position is posterior to the achieved lens position, the IOL is more anterior, resulting in a post-op myopic error. Whereas if the IOL is more posterior, you again get a hyperopic error. So all these are variations from the effective lens position and the achieved lens position. So in our methods, we had a routine cataract evaluation and 5 weeks post-op biometry and post-op refraction was taken. And eliminating measurement bias, the independent technicians were blinded. And the achieved refraction was accurate to 1/8 of a diopter, and swept source OCT biometry was done. And there was a precision of 2 to 3 microns for the ALP or achieved lens position. Statistical methods were applied. And follow-up was 100%, and statistical methods were applied with intention to treat analysis done, and the calculation for a single mean was done. And in the results, there was definitely an improvement from pre-op and post-op visual acuity, which was significant, and this fell into the NHS benchmark, which means that most of the eyes, 94.29% of eyes were within plus or minus 0.5 diopters of the expected. The histogram shows the same. And achieved, when comparing, achieved spherical equivalent and effective lens position showed a significant correlation with a significant Spearman's rule. But interesting to note is that there was no correlation between achieved spherical equivalent and achieved lens position, or expected lens position and achieved lens position. So this is the Bland-Altman plots, which showed poor agreement between expected and achieved spherical equivalence and effective lens position and achieved lens positions. We had a small subgroup analysis also. So this is the plot for IOL model versus ELP. Here you can see that there is a huge variation in the interquartile range for the IOL model 4, which is TECNIS 1, which means that this IOL is likely to have more variability in terms of the ocular parameter measurement, and which was many other IOLs had more tighter box plots. And this was the plot against IOL model for mean spherical equivalent post-op. Again, most of the IOLs, IOL 1, 2, 3, and 4 had a near normal or emmetropic or a slightly myopic kind of refraction, whereas this is the 5th IOL, which is supraphobe, which had a marked hyperopic kind of refraction. TECNIS 1 was more or less emmetropic. So implications, what are the implications for practice? If the interquartile ranges are small, like this in TECNIS 1, and the spherical equivalent is emmetropic post-op, this IOL is probably the best, and it can be used with better predictability. If there is a myopic or hyperopic error, we need to work on our A constants here. And then if you have a large IQ interquartile box plot, there is something more on the hyperopic side, especially for supraphobe. Here you have to check for IOL geometry. And again, if you go for a constant optimization also here, there might not be a marked improvement in the outcomes. And if it is emmetropic after that, again, there is a limitation to what we can do further. So subgroup analysis shows that when to optimize the lens constant and limitations of a constant personalization, and understanding the correlation between refractive outcomes and ELP, one can actually improve the outcomes without calculation. So the limitations are, we included only normal axial sync and we were not able to randomize. So again, thin lens effective lens position is a major source of error. Calculations can, based on ELP, can further refine our refractive outcomes, and combining intraoperative measurements would result in significant improvements in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sanita.
Yes, sir.
So basically, the whole thing about modern IOL implantation is the effective lens position.
Yes.
And you showed that there's not significant correlation between achieved and expected lens position. The results varied according to the lenses, and you said that some of them perform better. But then how do you explain, even for the better performing lens, that we are not achieving the expected lens position and yet getting good results?
Yeah, there is a problem like that, sir, because naturally we expect that if the achieved lens position is same as the ELP,
because that's the basis for the surgery.
Yeah.
No?
So there should be, what we thought was that is the difference between the IOL geometry between the different designs, because some of the IOLs tend to go more into the posterior capsule. I mean, they are more posteriorly located. So that is not the position, that is not the problem with the calculation of ELP, but rather it's different.
The lens design. The lens design. So some of them are more forgiving, you say?
Yeah,
okay.
It should be said.
Fine. Okay. Thank you. Any questions, or we can go on? I think we're exceeding time. So the TNOA presentation is there. Presenter is there.
So I have, this is Dr. Nikhil here. So I have.
Okay, Nikhil, please start. Left. Nikhil, please start. Please start. Please start.
I'm sorry,
right
sir. I was in the different.
It's okay. Right, just start. It's okay. We know that. Right. Start. Please start.
Yes.
So it's presentation number 4.
Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. My topic for today is demystifying the enigma behind aerosolization during phacoemulsification. Now, as we all know, there are almost 18 crore cases of COVID worldwide today. And also what has been documented is that COVID is spread through aerosols. So our research question was, are aerosols generated during phacoemulsification?
Last presentation और है तो वो judges ने लिया है तो उसके बाद मैं end करती हूँ session. और जो हमारे next speakers है वो ready है ना?
Please mute yourself, everyone else.
उसमें से key speaker.
My material and methods were as follows. There were a string of experiments we did in collaboration with IISc Bangalore, which was rated as the #1 research center in the world recently. Our experimental setup had 2 arms, arm 1 and arm 2. In arm 1, a goat's eye was placed in a mannequin. a ultra high resolution, high speed camera, which captures almost 20,000 frames per second was used. And a high definition light, a Veritas strobe light was used. This shown in the photo is a shadowgraphy setup. So in shadowgraphy, along with a high resolution camera, can even image particles of size between 10 to 30 microns. We use different wound size and sleeve combinations. So here we see an incision size of 2.2 along with a sleeve size of 2.2. Here the incision size was larger of 2.8, sleeve size yet being 2.2. Here the incision size was 3.2. Here the incision and the sleeve size again were matched at 2.8. And here the incision and the sleeve size were 3.2 and 2.8 respectively. In the experimental setup too, we used a cadaveric human corneostelli mounted on an artificial anterior chamber. We performed dynamic phaco, that is actual phaco held in the hand of an operating surgeon, and also a static phaco where the phaco probe was attached and static. So what were the results of our study? When the phaco was performed with a sleeve size equal to the wound size, here on the left, we see a slow motion video, and on the right, a shadowgraphy. Here we see that even at 2000 frames per second, there are absolutely no aerosols being generated whatsoever. When the phaco was performed with a sleeve size lesser than the wound size, we observed that there was a gentle trickle from the main wound, but there was no aerosolization at all. You could observe the gentle trickle on the shadowgraphy. When we performed the dynamic phaco in the anterior chamber, the findings were same. There was absolutely no aerosolization seen, either picked up on shadowgraphy or on a slow motion camera. And then we performed a static phaco at the corneal lip. That means the phaco probe, the tip of the phaco probe was at the lip of the wound. And in this case, what we observed was there was profuse amount of aerosolization, which is demonstrated both in a slow motion camera and in the shadowgraphy technique that we performed with at 2000 frames per second. So in conclusion, we found that phaco performed in the anterior chamber produces no aerosols whatsoever. A phaco performed with a wound size larger than the sleeve size can cause slow leak of fluid, which trickles down, but there is no aerosolization. And a phaco performed with the phaco probe tip at the wound causes profuse aerosolization. So what new does our study add? We were the first to use shadowgraphy and high-speed photography to demonstrate aerosol generation. We were the first study to demonstrate that no visible or invisible aerosols are generated during phacoemulsification, thus quashing all the rumors being published elsewhere. And the use of match tip, sleeve, and incision size and ultrasound power usage only after the tip is completely inside the anterior chamber ensures that there is no aerosolization whatsoever during phacoemulsification. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikhil, for a very interesting study. But just one quick question: this is a simulation studies? These are. Did you do it on actual patients in the OR?
Yes, sir. So in these studies which were performed in two arms, one on the goat's eye and one on using the artificial anterior chamber, because the shadowgraphy technique.
No, that's fine. Did you do it in the setup in the OT is totally different, and
correct.
the
so
pressures
in
are
the
different.
In the OT, what we did is we used the ultra high definition normal phone camera with a slow motion, and we found there was absolutely no aerosolization there either. We could not set up the shadowgraphy technique in an OT because the technique in which you need the position of the whole setup has to be perfectly lying between a high intensity light and the camera, which could not calculate which not capture the images in a OT. So it was to simulate the exact conditions of like a OT is. That's why we performed our second arm on an artificial anterior chamber using a corneal corneostellal ring.
Okay. Any other questions? So in case there are no other questions, I think there's the last Tamil Nadu Ophthalmic Association winner was supposed to be speaking. Is the gentleman here or the lady? The winner of that session, TNOA session? Is the presenter here? In case no, then Dr. Tiwari, I'll request you to take over and.
Dr. Tiwari, I would request you to unmute yourself. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So I will request all the judges to complete their sheet, and it should be neat and clean. And within 10 minutes, you have to send it to the given number. I think all the judges have the number. If you
Yes,
don't
sir.
have the number, I'll repeat the number. I think everybody has the number.
Everyone has
Even then I'm repeating. Everybody has, I think.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Shall I
sir.
repeat the number?
Yes,
So
sir.
we have the number.
So we'll send it.
Okay.
We'll send a sheet,
Okay.
respective sheets. Okay, sir.
Okay.
Other mark
Thank you
sheets
so
can be sent on WhatsApp as well as on mail. So
Okay.
Yeah.
both the platforms. So I think we'll conclude this session.